Okay, well, hello biology class. Today I'm going to be covering chapter 17.4, part 1, looking at the evidence of evolution. But before I move on to that, I just want to quickly recap 17.3, talking about describing the conditions for natural selection and how we believe that explains the unity, how all organisms are have shared a common ancestor in the past, as well as why they are different, diversity of life. So there are 4 conditions for natural selection to occur. And if I just back up here, right here, you need certain conditions to occur. First off, more individuals are born than can survive. So there's that need to outcompete each other for resources. Some type of variation that is heritable, which means it can be passed on to the offspring, affects their ability to survive as well as reproduce. So it's going to be variation and adaptation. And then finally, how fitness varies among individuals. So we talked about what does it mean to have high fitness, which means you survive and you produce a large number of offspring, versus low fitness, which means that you may not survive or you have low survivability rates and you produce less offspring. So I gave you a very uncommon example here with the clownfish, how one clownfish was funny and the rest were really serious, and the shark killed the clownfish that were not funny, and if you were funny you got to live, and that means you got to pass on that trait to your offspring, and now we have selection going on. But obviously that's not really true. It's just a kind of a made up example to kind of get the point across. But anyways, today, evidence for evolution. There's actually kind of like 4 key areas that support evolution. So I'm going to talk a little bit about geologic distribution, also known as biogeography, the fossil record, how that has documented the descent of modern species. We're going to go into comparative anatomy, looking at structures, comparing them to different organisms, and then talk about the molecular biology parts. Now that we have technology, DNA sequencing, molecular analysis of genomes. And then tomorrow, you're going to watch a short clip on the Galapagos finches and basically just showcase how evolution has occurred within the last 40 years on the Galapagos Islands with 2 scientists, Peter and Rosemary Grant. Now, the evidence for evolution, first off, biogeography. Basically, you're looking at where organisms live now and where their ancestors have lived in the past. We have to remember that Earth today is not the Earth that it was millions of years ago, and that we at one point had supercontinents, a supercontinent called Pangaea, and we have found fossil records of organisms on one continent and on another. And in fact, Antarctica, if you were to go underneath all that ice, you would actually find fossils of tropical trees and species, okay, underneath all that ice. So, biogeography is just looking at where organisms live now and where their ancestors may have lived. Camels, okay, this is the modern members of the camel family. They've actually kind of traced the migration patterns of it, okay, so yeah. But there's 2 very important observations with biogeography. First off, closely related but different. So, looking at the Galapagos finches and their beak sizes, they are closely related because we believe they all came from a common ancestor finch, but because of the different environmental conditions on each island, they have gone their own ways to adapt to that environment, primarily with beak sizes. So the beak is suited to their environment. So we have finches that have very large beaks that can crack into large seeds. We have finches that have very small beaks that might eat insects or very small seeds. And we have intermediates, and it's best suited to their environment. Second observation with biogeography is distantly related but similar. So we see organisms that have evolved similar adaptations because they live in the same environment or face similar challenges, but they are not closely related at all. So ground-dwelling birds, remember the emus, rheas, and the ostriches, okay? They all resemble one another, but they are not closely related at all. They just experience the same environmental conditions or challenges. So they all have adapted to or have evolved an adaptation for long legs and feet for running away from their prey or something. So a very blurry picture of the flightless birds that are found throughout the world. Okay, second piece of evidence for evolution is the age of Earth and its fossils, mostly the fossil record. So Earth is really old, 4.5 billion years. We know this through radioactive dating. And obviously this gives us a huge time frame for evolution to take place by natural selection, because it does take some time. But our fossil records show that many modern species have evolved from extinct ancestors. So like today's horse has, basically one toe, but at, millions of years ago, it was actually like the size of a small dog and it had multiple toes. And so as it evolved or adapted to its changing environment, mostly living in a jungle, tropical area, to an open grassland, it runs on its toes for speed, basically. We have found intermediate fossils, not just with horses, but like linking amphibians to fish. We have found intermediate fossils linking reptiles to birds. Okay, but the thing I want to emphasize with the fossil record is like, yeah, we find fossils and sometimes they're bits and pieces and, we may misinterpret pieces of that, but the record will never, ever, 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 ever be complete. If you guys remember back in Earth Science 8, with plate tectonics and rock being recycled, especially the rock cycle, fossils can get destroyed. Not only that, in order to form a fossil, it has to have unique conditions. So this record will never, ever be complete, but the fossils that we do come across are valuable information about the past. Okay, the third is called comparative anatomy. So comparing structures in animals. So there's actually going to be three structures we're going to talk about: homologous structures, analogous structures, and vestigial structures. So first up is called homologous structures. Homo means same, okay? Homologous structures means similar origin, but a different function. So if you notice the bones of these limbs here, of a seal, bird, bat, horse, and a human arm, you notice that all of them have phalanges, metacarpals, carpals, a radius and an ulna, and a humerus. But the function of each of these limbs is a lot different. Swimming, flight, two flights here, running, and grasping tools. So it suggests that maybe at some point all of these organisms had shared a common ancestor because they have the same bone makeup in their limbs, but they have evolved to carry out a different function based on the environment that they are in. So, maybe an ancient lobed fin fish with all of these bones, which we have found. From there, we get these animals because they all have the same structures, okay, same origin, but different function. Second structure I want to talk about is vestigial structures. Remnants of organs or a structure that had a function in its early ancestor, but doesn't really have a function anymore. Humans have a lot of vestigial structures. So you can just Google vestigial structures in humans, and you'll come up with like body hair. But the one I like to talk about is the appendix. Okay, appendix really doesn't do anything. Okay, they believe it maybe housed bacteria. It kind of does still, but we don't use it. Houses bacteria to help break down like cellulose or grasses. Another vestigial structure inside of us. Okay, so I said body hair. Like, why do we have hair on our bodies? Because it doesn't really serve any purpose to keep us warm. Why do males have nipples? Tonsils. What's the purpose of tonsils? I mean, you can have them removed and you're going to be just fine. There's like people that can wiggle their ears. And what I mean by wiggle, I mean like wiggle, like wiggle their ears. But a lot of us don't have the muscles to do that anymore. Whales, why do they have hip bones? Maybe at one point whales did have a limb that's been reduced over time because they didn't need it. Snakes have hip bones or a pelvic girdle that remains. Although I do remember a college teacher, professor, that told us that with hip bones and boas, it might have been used to, it is used to help grasp the female during copulation, but I'm not exactly sure. Okay, so yeah. Why do ostriches have wings if they're flightless? So these are all vestigial structures, remnants of organs or structures that had a function at one point, but no longer serve a function anymore. The third structure is analogous structures. Okay, it's kind of like the opposite of homologous structures. We have here, though, similar function, but a different origin. So wings of birds versus wings of insects. The wings of birds and wings of insects are both used for flight. There's my similar function, but they don't look anything alike. Insect wings don't have a radius and ulna, carpals, metacarpals, bone, muscle, flesh. Their wings are made of chitin. Okay, so just to recap between homologous and analogous, homologous means similar structure, similar origin, but carries out a different job, whereas analogous is the opposite. Similar function, here, flight, different origin, different structure. Underneath comparative anatomy, they include development or embryology. And so this is a picture, cartoon picture showing early embryo stages of lizards, tortoise, pig, and human. And you can kind of see they all look very similar in the early stages, but then as cells differentiate and body plans become more apparent, they become different organisms. But it's like, why do we have pharyngeal pouches? You know, and then ours turn into eustachian tubes, while with other organisms they turn into different structures. So, all right, the last piece of evidence for evolution is genetics, or the molecular biology component, where you look at the genetic code and you compare them to other organisms. Now, the genetic code, the 4 letters A, C, T, and G, we find those 4 letters in all organisms, so it's nearly identical in most organisms. We also have molecular homology, looking at something called Hox genes. And so I'm not going to dive too much into Hox genes here in Biology 10, but Hox genes are genes responsible for the destinations of body parts, where the head forms, where the arm forms, where the leg forms. And so at least some Hox genes are found in almost all descendants, which means that, hey, maybe at one point they shared a common ancestor. So this picture is showing, actually I don't know what organism this is on the bottom. This is a fruit fly, oh here, mouse embryo, and this is a fruit fly, and you can kind of see that, yeah, they have some of the same Hox genes found throughout. When we compare genomes, we are very similar to chimpanzees, but that doesn't mean we came from chimps. It just means we probably shared a common ancestor. With mice, I mean, that's why mice are great model organisms. We tend to do experiments with mice before, we move on to the human trial, or we use mice to help us understand more about diseases found in humans, because a lot of the diseases we have can be found in mice as well. Okay, so. All right, so this picture is just showing amino acids and how the number of amino acid differences between humans. We have the same amino acids in us as we do as chimpanzees, but there's only one amino acid difference in rhesus monkeys. And as you go down, notice that, like these are all mammals, so we have low number of differences. But then as you get to like, yeast or wheat germ or even a fruit fly, the differences are greater. So that they are just talking about how the greater differences means the more different we are from each other, or like we shared a common ancestor really, 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 really long time ago versus these organisms up here. Okay, I like showing this picture. It's about pseudogenes and vitamin C. And it says other non-human mammals can produce vitamin C. They don't need it from their diet. Humans, on the other hand, have had ancestors that have been eating fruit for so long, which is high in vitamin C, that our vitamin C genes long ago mutated. However, we do possess its remnant gene in a pseudogene form that's just no longer red and made into a protein. So, kind of cool. All right, now, tomorrow you are going to watch a very short video on Peter and Rosemary Grant, a couple that has been going to the Galapagos Islands for over 40 years and capturing finches and measuring everything about them, their weight, their beak size, whether or not they survive the next season. They actually take these birds and they trap them every year, and they do all these measurements, and then they have been recording how these species have been changing over the course of just a few decades. And they're noticing that, yeah, the environment does shape the organism's beak size, okay? So I just want you to just watch this video. I think you have to answer a 4-question exit card on the video, but it's actually really, really, really cool, Okay, so I do have the link here, but the link will be posted on Google Classroom tomorrow as well. All right, and then after that, we're going to wrap up Chapter 17. I mean, like, after you watch this movie, we're pretty much done with Chapter 17. I think I'm going to do a 17.3, 17.4 quiz the following day I see you. Let me see if I can pull up my calendar real quick here. It would be probably April 14th, which is a Tuesday. It's right after you come back from Easter break, but I'll give you more information when we get there. All right, and then after that, we're going to be kind of done with evolution and just jump into ecology. All right, remember, if you have any questions, make sure you reach out through Remind or email so I can help you. All right, take care.